there, dear friends, and thank you for that warm welcome. Always appreciated. Now, in today's video, we have Scott Henderson and Paul on the plane coming here to tell you all about NASA's equipment failures. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. That's going to be real good now, isn't it, dear friends? Not only equipment failures, but all the crap that they've got thrown about and spewed about all over the lunar surface. And not only that, but they're going to show you where the rover's wheels even leak oil and spit dust up all over them and get stuck all over the place now. Now that's going to be good. So, without further ado here, let's hear Paul on the plane and Scott Henderson. Take it away! Yay! Yay!
You know, Scott, I think it'd be important to point out the Apollo 15 stage accident where the lunar lander appeared to be dropped and the rover broke off.
Right there, that's the strap that broke when they were simulating the landing. And that particular picture is the hammer and the feather. And dropping the hammer and the feather is kind of symbolic as they drop the lander. And that strap is actually molded in a design or stitched in a design so that they slip over the top of the leg of the lander itself. So they just come down with the crane, slide it on the top, and then they can just slide them back off again. That let go on one leg, and it probably dropped 8 to 10 feet on the one side. And when you watch the video of the landing itself, you can see it drop. It takes about 3/4 of a second for it to drop down there, and the leg actually kicks out. The secondary struts are snapped right off, right at the swivel ball joints, because those legs folded in and then folded out for the landing. So it folded in when they loaded it on the rocket and then folded back out again. So they have ball swivel joints on it. The swivel joints are broken, they're left laying on the ground. There's pictures of that showing that. Of course, they didn't have any when it was done. They only showed the pictures after they had repaired it. But all the broken pieces, they just threw it underneath the machine and left them there. They didn't even clean them up. Okay, on that particular one, that's the exhaust bell housing underneath. Of course, the legs broke. The exhaust housing actually hit the ground and it crushed it down. The arms that are hanging down there are the lowering arms for the rover. It was attached to that, and those lanyards, the cables that are coming down there, have broken right off. The ends of them are sheared right off, and the swivel arms swung out and down on are left, broken right off, laying on the ground. That's how hard it hit. It literally snapped the rover right off the machine itself. So the rover is damaged, the wheels are damaged on it, the steering's damaged, the seats are damaged, and the fenders are damaged on it. When they initially took the first EVA on it, they had to wait a few hours, so they had them do a stand-up EVA. Then they had a little lunch and a little nap, so they got 6 or 7 hours in time there to do some work around the machine. They fixed the rover up, but they couldn't get the front steering working, so they just locked him in solid and only had rear-wheel steering. It is a 4-wheel steering machine. The first EVA, they went out, they only had rear-wheel steering. Now, there is one person that does a presentation, I won't say who it is, claiming that they parked the rover in the shade, and when they came out, the steering was fixed, it was working, so all 4 wheels were steerable again. After that was quite hilarious.
It was the mobile moon mechanic ferry.
Yeah, the lunar station fixed it up there. But they didn't get it right, didn't get the alignment right on it, between the front and the rear on it. So it dog tracks all the time, and it makes a very funny track. It actually makes a track like it's a straight bar line because the tires are kicked sideways.
Oh, that's hilarious. So let me get this straight. I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head around the audaciousness or the audacity of these people. So when you're talking about that these straps broke during the simulated landing, right? So what the simulated landing was is they were actually lowering this thing down on the moon, and they were calling it a simulation. But then, after it was down on the moon, Then cut to supposedly real life, real footage on the moon, and there on the ground is still all the broken stuff and the cables, the broken cables, and all this. And this was supposedly live then?
The video shot on it shows it was done a couple of weeks before.
Well, I'm just trying to put this in context because, I mean, so the picture that we're looking at now, is this supposed to be real live from the moon footage?
Those photographs?
Yes.
Well, that's what NASA says they are. They're
Right, yeah.
real live from Arizona landfill site.
But I'm just trying to.
They dropped it down on a large gantry crane. The strap let go and it dropped to the ground, and they had to come in and fix the stuff up.
Right, but they called that a simulation, right? They
That would
called
be
that a
not
simulation, as in it wasn't real because obviously there was no photographer on the moon to watch it come down, right? So they had to call that a simulation. But then afterwards, we're getting this picture, which was supposedly taken on the moon, right? And it still has the broken pieces from when it was dropped on the quote-unquote simulation.
And that's the third day.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
They did a stand-up EVA, then they had lunch, they went to sleep, then they got up, got on the rover. That gave them enough time to fix the rover up to get at least 2 wheels of it steering. Then they went out for the whole day. Came back, then when they went out on the second EVA, and when they came back, they were out about 6.5 hours, and then that's when they did shots of the flag and everything else. Now, all the other missions, of course, if you were actually going to the moon, the very first thing you would do would be to set up the experimental equipment, because just in case your time was cut short, that stuff is there. It's supposed to be giving you information back for years to come, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the first thing you're going to set up. You're not going to go out and just ride around on this rover and collect rock samples. You're going to set that equipment up. That's the first thing you're going to put the flag up because you're an American citizen.
Of course.
Right? And do that, and to get the TV camera set up so you can do that. And then you're going to set up the experimental equipment. Then you're going to set the rover up and take it out for a ride. Well, that's not what happened. There are no shots of them descending and no shots of their first steps on the moon in Apollo 15. Another very important event that an American citizen would want to see, like they did for all the other ones, right? Everybody has their descent down.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any video of that. An onboard TV camera. There's an onboard DAC camera for that. There's the outside TV camera for that that's supposed to flip open on its own on the lower mesa there and shoot to the ladder for them to come down on. And there's some shots of the equipment that's broken. That's the actual footpad's broken right off there.
Wow. That's incredible.
Now, with the lander legs themselves, okay, with empty descent engine fuel tanks, the weight of the lander in lunar gravity, just the weight of the machine, those are work on slides. The bottom 32 inches will slide down to take the compression. Just the weight of the machine, it should drop down 10 inches out of the 32. Just the weight of the machine, without any G-forces of it landing. So the foil down there, the gold part at the bottom up to the copper colored to the gold foil in there, that should have wrinkled up at least 10 inches right there, because that's where that joint is. Now, these are not like shocks like a car. What's inside there are aluminum honeycomb. So it's a one-time compression, so it's like squashing a pop can. They have one up to 4,500 pounds and the other one's up to 9,500 pounds. They would take the impact for. So the entire machine can take up to 3 Gs of impact in lunar gravity with empty descent engine tanks. Just the weight of that. So it's 3/4 of a G per leg, and that will travel 32 inches. So what you see from the secondary strut to the pad down, or from the bottom of the ladder to the ground. So if it took 3 G force, the ladder would be touching the ground. Now the problem with that is that they're cambered out. As they are compressing down, the diameter of the legs gets narrower. They have to slide in. And it put a huge amount of force on those secondary struts. It's just a poor design.
You know, that also reminds me of, you know, what I was saying earlier in the show about Mars rotating at 500 and some odd miles per hour. But same thing with the moon. And the moon, of course, has even less than 1% atmosphere, far less. It's a fraction of a percentage of atmosphere. So for all practical purposes, the moon has no atmosphere. So again, I'm curious, you know, the moon is rotating at a very slow rate. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think it's somewhere around 12 to 14 miles an hour, right? Which again is about the speed of a treadmill if somebody on it actually running full speed. So I have to wonder, you know, what kind of accommodation did NASA make for these things sitting down on essentially a treadmill that would be running at 12 to 14 miles an hour underneath them, because that seems to me that would be an enormous shock to those struts. But I have a feeling that they didn't even...
Neil was driving. Everything's okay.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, as long as he had it under control.
Yeah, he had control of it. What you're looking at there, the pink foam there, that's just foam that fills in at the top of the legs themselves. Across there. That's what fits over top of the tubing that's up on there to fill it in, and then they put the mylar foil over top of it. All of that stuff is broken. That's where the leg broke and snapped up, and it tore all that stuff off.
Looking more and more like a homeless tweaker shelter every day, right?
Yes, and the round piece that's ribbed down there, there's a couple of it, and the other one with the ring, that's for the RTG pack. That's their nuclear pack on the side that they bring down and go. And that thing is fallen down and open. That's the lowering arms for it to slide down that they take it out of.
It looks like a Ghostbusters proton pack, actually.
Yes. What you're looking at in that particular picture, there's actually 2 life support packs on the ground there. But those are simply to cool the suits. Those are just the canisters in there, and they'd have fans in them to cool the suit. Those would have been developed just for running around with the suits while they were practicing on it. If they were on the moon, they wouldn't need those ones. They'd actually need ones with oxygen. Of course, they'd have to be welded together, not just riveted together.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't seal anything.
Yeah, that's amazing. And all the stuff is just strewn all over the moon's surface.
They didn't bother to clean it up.
Yeah, obviously this was an accident. Obviously wasn't intentional. So when it happened, they, did what, they did some cleanup and had to rearrange things. But the funny thing to me was starting to look at the rover pictures after this, because the rovers were just 15, 16, and 17. So, they drop the LEM or it breaks and the rover is damaged. And it's never the same again. It continues to break down, and they have problems with it for all 3 of the missions. In fact, Scott, what is it? You found 2 or 3 for 16, or 2 or 3 different rovers in the pictures. If you look at
more.
16 to 17.
Officially, How many did they take up with them?
1.
Just 1. Okay.
1 for each mission. 1 for 15, 1 for 16, 1 for 17. They didn't bring it back with them and use it again and fly up. I mean, they came back, they left them on those locations.
Yeah, right? So there should be 3 dune buggies up there then.
Yeah, and this one can be identified. The 15 rover has an oil leak on the rear left axle, and it keeps getting worse over time, and the oil is spraying around as the tire rotates. It's getting all over the rim, and then the dirt's sticking to it, and is sitting there. On that particular picture, the one on the right, the Apollo 17 is on the right at the top there. And you can see with the rotation of the tire, it's going up the equipment rack at the back. Half of it is covered in oil as well. And if you look at the stripe on the frame rail, that's the first thing I saw is the astronauts have cleaned that stripe off, the black and white stripe. They've cleaned it off, clean as a whistle, just to bring attention to it, right? Because the rest of it's covered in oil.
Right. Looks like they just took a chassis of an old Ford Edsel up there, and it just about as mechanically reliable too, it looks like.
Yeah, and they've reused that design again.
Yeah.
Shouldn't those tires be like melting on the face of the moon or something? Because they say that
metal.
The moon's in a vacuum, right? But the surface and the radiation up there hypothetically would just be ridiculous. But yeah, okay.
Well, those are titanium bands inside a wire mesh with a titanium tread. And it's the only spot where they have any use for the titanium. All the other
Titanium
stuff,
tread.
yeah, just the chevron pattern on it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I want to see somebody drive I think that they say that car weighed 75 pounds on the moon. So go ahead and try and drive around and make turns at 75-pound vehicle. You would end up on your side so quickly.
Yeah. Apollo 14, of course, had a cart, like a little golf cart that they pulled the equipment around on, and it just has Goodyear rubber tires on it.
Wow.
Okay?
That's where
And I mean, if they worked in 14, why would they have to go out of trouble for the rover?
Yeah, same with Elon Musk's car. It just had regular tires.
They got that cart on display in their museum with those Goodyear rubber tires on.
And you know what's funny about that is if they're just regular old tires, and this is something that we covered, I don't know, several weeks back when I was talking about the tires on the Tesla Roadster, saying, well, I thought that they would probably explode. And of course, many people came back and said, well, they probably just pulled the valve stems out. Okay, fair enough, great. But I must reiterate that Elon Musk said that nothing special was done to that car whatsoever. But
Yeah, he said it was just a normal car. Yeah.
yeah, just a normal car. But then, so I started looking at tires and how do they recycle them? And I find that they pour liquid nitrogen on them, which gets them down to like around minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they are able to simply shatter them at that point. So, I'm thinking about this, and on the moon, supposedly the temperature swings from a negative 250 to a positive 250 at least, right? That's a minimum swing. So you have a 500-degree temperature differential from sunlight to not sunlight, and for anything to have rubber tires on there, in the sunlight they would melt, and in the non-sunlight they would become so cold and brittle they would absolutely shatter. So, how could they have ever been functional?
They used the ones from the space shuttle.
Yeah. And what were the space shuttle ones made out of? I have no idea.
I have no idea. I don't know how you put 150 pounds of pressure in there and take it to that torque value.
Main gear touchdown. Pilot Barry Wilmore deploying the drag chute. Nose gear touchdown. Atlantis now rolling out on runway 33 at Kennedy Space Center. Wrapping up a 4,490,138-mile flight to the International Space Station.
Houston, Atlantis, we'll stop.
Roger, we'll stop Atlantis. That was a picture-perfect end to a top-fueled mission to the space station. Everybody, welcome back to Earth, especially you, Nicole. We'll meet you on page 5-3, the entry checklist.
Begin the post landing. First tank, first tank, first tank, first tank, first tank.